What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and when it comes down to it, and there are many Fire Emblem YouTubers basically have, whenever they make countdowns involving Fire Emblems, it's almost always about the same specific ones. Either about their favorite or best characters from specific games, their the best or worst bosses in Fire Emblem, or the best maps/chapters in Fire Emblem. That being said, there hasn't been anyone who has, to my knowledge, who has ever done a countdown of their favorite skills in Fire Emblem. In fact, the only one that I know about that's done something like this is Blazing Knight. And honestly, I believe it's high time for me to do one of my own here. So, basically, it's kind of worth it. That being said, it's time to count down my top 10 favorite Fire Emblem skills. In all fairness, that being said, the rule is we're taking a look to be eligible for this list. They have to be a skill from a Fire Emblem game that I've played, which are a lot, but while most of them are going to be from the modern games, even though many of them have appeared in FE4, which was the first one to introduce skills. That being said, in all fairness, even further than that, no personal skills. Those will have their own list later on down the line. Hopefully. So, that being said, without further ado, let's get started. Starting off first at number 10, we have Life Taker. Alright. For those that have seen my top 10 favorite Nintendo 3DS games, they know that Fire Emblem Awakening was the first ever Fire Emblem game that I owned physically, which is saying a lot. But that being said, I've more or less been able to enjoy it, as it introduced me to a lot of Fire Emblem, well, I guess I'd say gimmicks and such that are prevalent today. But that being said, when it comes down to it, it's very fair to say that it introduced me to skills. And ever since then, I've had a lot of my favorite skills. One of my most favorite skills has got to be Life Taker, which is the fact that it's the signature skill of the Dark Knight class is kind of amazing. And basically, it's one of the most useful classes for anyone, as basically whenever your unit attacks your unit defeats an opponent in battle, they gain HP. They gain back HP from half the damage dealt to that opponent. And basically, it's just Fire Emblem's answer to the Pokemon attacks Absorb and Mega Drain. That being said, the reason why Life Taker is on this list is naturally because of one unit, Ricken. basically, I really do like Rickon as one of my favorite Fire Emblem Awakening characters. And every time I play through Awakening, I tend to make him a Dark Knight. And while he does have a solid start, when he gets Life Taker, that's when he really gets online, as he becomes a veritable juggernaut. And honestly, I couldn't be prouder. Not only that, but it's also continued in Fire Emblem Fates. It's with Leo, who also makes amazing use of this skill, naturally fitting his more pragmatic nature. Kind of fitting once you realize how much I love magical units. That's a lot. Moving on, next at number 9, we have Ignis. Speaking of Fire Emblem Awakening, Fire Emblem Awakening was the first game for all of us, not just me, to introduce the idea of a playable avatar, that being the amnesiac strategist Robin. And in all fairness, this really does say a lot, as it sets a bar for a lot of other playable avatars like Corrin, Byleth, and Alir. And heck, even further, I feel like this is the same thing that could happen in Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave with Eshmel. That being said, Fortune's Weave, that being said, Robin is more or less the gold standard. And it's because of Ignis. While they are basically the first, they're the first unit that you have that uses swords and magic, they gain access to, they easily enough can become the strongest, and can easily snowball to being one of the best units in your army. Especially since when Ignis procs, half of your magic stat gets put into every other stat, or half of your strength stat gets put into your magic when you initiate combat, depending on what weapon you use. And honestly, it definitely fits to them being one of the most broken units in Awakening. That, you would think that would be the end of that, but I wouldn't have expected it to return in Fire Emblem Engage as the signature skill of the Vadam class, the signature promoted class of Saline. And while in my previous playthrough of Engage, I made her a Mage Knight. Yeah, she still became one of the strongest units thanks to this skill. And she still became a potently strong unit thanks to this skill. And the fact that I really enjoy her the fact that I've been able to get enough use out of her Tea Party alt in Heroes doesn't hurt either. So yeah. Moving on, next at number 8, we have Kanto. And no, not the Pokemon region. Granted, for most of us in the West, we were kinda introduced to Kanto as basically it was known as Move Again. However, it wasn't until later on when it was implemented in most of the modern Fire Emblem games like Tellius or Three Houses, or heck, even for those of us who played through Genealogy, that we were introduced to Kanto proper. And honestly, the fact I was introduced to Kanto through this method, yeah, I have to say it. Honestly, this has become. I don't know where I would have been without this. And it really says a lot because after a unit basically it takes their action and it takes their action, like faces off against, basically defeats in battles or defeats an opponent, and they have a chance to move again. And as such, they can either basically advance and further in to basically tank any attack, if they're tanky enough, or have a chance to get out of dodge and basically attack or basically utilize a hit and run tactic. And as such, Kanto has it's thanks to the Kanto skill that I've discovered some of my favorites, like Chloe, Leonie, arguably enough Louis, arguably enough Louis and Bernadetta to a certain extent, and, Finn, and even the man himself, Sigurd, which honestly, really, it really kind of makes things easy here. And it's one of my favorite skills for a reason. That being said, there are times I wish Kanto had come in handy, like in my recent Iron Man playthrough of Path of Radiance, where Kieran died. But then again, it's small consolation when you consider I'm still wondering how he became a knight in the first place. Still don't get it. Moving on, next at number 7, we have Miracle. Alright. At first glance, Miracle doesn't seem like it's anything to write home about. But to many Fire Emblem players, Miracle is basically the definition of a make or break situation. And in all fairness, I get it. Because more often than not, I've escaped from losing a solid unit that I've enjoyed thanks to the... I've basically had moments where I would have lost a unit that I enjoyed that was prevented due to the Miracle skill proccing. And whenever Miracle procs, it's able to your unit is basically just left on 1 HP. And in most other units, you really wouldn't think much about it. But more often than not, the ones that gain access to Miracle are healers. And yeah, that's what makes all the difference. As many healers tend to essentially make their mark due to this skill. I mean, for example, Mist is one of the most famous, or should I say infamous examples of this, not only due to joining at level 1, but due to the fact that in Radiant Dawn she can gain access to Alendite, which is, well, again, kind of strange, but also kind of interesting in considering how good that kid is. And in terms of, however, another unit that gains access to Miracle that I enjoy is Sakura. And in my video where I counted down my top 10 favorite Fire Emblem Fates Birthright characters, I put Sakura at number 1. And while I did mention the reasons in that video alone, which is divided into 2 parts, surprisingly enough, I gotta say, one reason that basically contributed to her being number 1 on my countdown is Miracle. And honestly, combined with her dodging attacks as well, more often than not saved her from certain deaths in more than one occasion. And keep in mind, most of the time I play through Fates, I play through it on Phoenix mode. So, yeah. Does it disqualify that? Maybe. But in fairness, I like Miracle just because. Moving on, next at number 6, we have Sure Strike. Alright. When it comes down to it, most people would be confused if I mentioned about Sure Strike. Because most people, if I talked about Sure Strike, and especially with the fact that it comes from Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. Naturally, because, well, in all fairness, Sacred Stones doesn't seem to be one of those games to have skills as we know of. That being said, yeah, Sacred Stones actually has skills. But of course, many of them have become iconic for that reason alone. And even with that, many of them are very amazing for any playthrough of Sacred Stones. Silencer is a very solid skill for the Assassin class, naturally due to what it would eventually become in later entries. Great Shield is basically just FE4 Pavis with another coat of paint. Slayer is a godsend in FE8 due to the amount of monsters in the game. And you even have the likes of Pierce, which is an amazing skill as well. However, Sure Strike is an amazing skill for that fact, as not only is it linked with the Sniper class, but whenever a unit uses this move, that means their next attack will always hit. Yeah. It hits 100% of the time, every time. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I am a big fan of archers and bow units as a whole. So I have a kind of a love for this class. And it's thanks to the Sure Strike skill that allowed me to see archers and other bow units with a more, positive light. In a more positive light. And ever since then, I've loved bow units, or those that wield the bow, full on ever since. Granted, while it did return and engage, I more or less never had a chance to utilize that skill due to Etier and Allchrist being solid on their own. However, that being said, here's hoping it makes a return in Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, especially with the likes of characters like Peter, Ursula, and Lillian. Here's hoping. Moving on next at number 5, we have Nihil. Alright. First off, the pronunciation of this one is kind of all over the place, as I have heard a lot of people pronounce this skill differently. Because I've heard some people pronounce it as Nihil. I've heard some people pronounce it as Nihil or Nile. That being said, no matter what is pronounced, one thing comes to mind. This skill is pretty OP. As basically, whenever a unit with this skill engages in battle with an opponent, it has the ability to more or less shut down any of the opponent's skills or any bonus damage, which makes it kind of any unit with this skill a force to be reckoned with. And it really says a lot, especially when it returns in Tellius. Only this time, it has a chance to nullify any opponent's skill. Any of the opponent's skills. Meaning you're left uncontested. However, the most that I remember it that puts this skill at number 5 is the Black Knight. Yeah. When you first come across the Black Knight in Path of Radiance, and you see this imposing mountain of a man coming out from a house, yeah, you're like, oh boy, I don't think I'm going to be able to defeat him. And let me tell you, that feeling is right, as I foolishly did so in my first playthrough. And I discovered if you have one of your units face off against him, he will kill you. I am not kidding. He will basically kill any unit that faces off against him. So basically, when he appears, your only recourse of action is to utilize the Joestar secret technique and run away. Yeah. That being said, the most that we know of is when it's finally time for Ike to face off against the Black Knight. And this is where the most stress comes in. As not only are you able to defeat as not only do you have to be able to defeat him in battle, but you also have to work around the Nihil skill. Which means equipping the Nihil skill to Ike in order to allow him to evenly match wits with the Black Knight. And again, this is something I did in my first playthrough, and I was stressing about it. But after it was done, everything was all the better. Or all for the best. Granted, I ended up getting Anna, but the issue still stands. And now I'm realizing I'm gonna have to face off against him in Radiant Dawn. What a mess. What a mess. Moving on next at number 4, we have Astra. Speaking of OP skills, in all my times of playing through Fire Emblem, I've realized I've never given the Swordmaster class the respect that they've been owed. And honestly, they are just amazing units. Even when you consider that there are a fair amount of Swordmasters who are just edgy for the sake of being edgy. Like Navarre, Rutger, Felix, or Lon'Q. But even with that, all of them are fairly solid, but they ended up getting worth their salt thanks to the Astra skill. And naturally, in the long run, it's thanks to this skill that's become known as the Swordmaster skill. Basically, whenever this skill procs, you're basically attacking with a fifth of your power, but you get to attack 5 times. Basically as a sort of a death of 1,000 cuts. That being said, yeah, each of those times, you're going to get a chance to crit. So, basically, you're critting each one of those 5 times, or just suddenly getting a crit in the middle of it, and it's gonna do a lot of damage. And it's this skill that can make some very frightening units. Again, the first one that comes to mind is Aira from Genealogy of the Holy War. And as someone who's played through Genealogy of the Holy War, let me tell you, Aira is not a unit you want your army to face off against because of this skill. That's why whenever I play through Chapter 1 of Genealogy, I have Lex lead her away. For that reason alone. But when she does join your army, she is one of your best units because of that skill. And her speed, so yeah. But then however, there's another unit that not only gave me a chance to, and not only allowed me to respect Swordmasters, but I've said it so many times before. Ryoma plus Raijinto plus Astra plus Vantage is broken. yeah, just... And no joke, every time I play through Fates and use Ryoma in battle, he's either constantly critting or proccing Astra every chance he gets. And honestly, I can't help but respect that. I really can't. Moving on next, at number 3, we have the insta-kill skills. Oh boy. If you already hadn't guessed, the previous entries are entries that basically I either like due to a specific class or basically have been on this list because of a specific unit that makes the best use of it. Or something entirely. Or something else entirely. Kind of one of those that kind of remind me of my past playthroughs of many of these different Fire Emblem titles. But in all fairness, sometimes whenever I play a Fire Emblem title, I just want to turn my brain off and just one-shot an opponent instantly. And apparently, intelligence systems in Fire Emblem had the same idea, as ever since FE7 and Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, they've introduced skills that will basically instantly allow your unit to instantly kill any opponent they face off against. Again, the first time we see this is when Jafar basically is tasked with killing Layla by Nergal. And basically, when we're introduced to his... And it's with that first taste of the assassinate skill that we basically get goosebumps. And we discover that this is one of the most badass and awesome characters in the game. And he definitely shows it. Kind of fitting once you realize the guy has the nickname, the Angel of Death. That being said, even with that, these instant kills, even when they've returned in Tellius and many other games since then, they have had some, these skills have had some awesome names that honestly really tend to get ahead, that you really mean business when you're using these, because you just delete any you have your unit absolutely delete any opponent that they face off against. And we're talking Silencer, Impale, Colossus, Lethality, Deadeye, Rend, Tear, Savage, Flare, Corona, Lethality, Assassinate, Pierce. Yeah, just everything. And honestly, anytime you get one of these skills, you know you are gonna do some damage to the opposing army. Just amazing. Moving on next at number 2, we have Soul. Alright. Honestly, there are a lot of you. We started this countdown with Life Taker, which is basically a sort of magical skill that allows the unit to gain back health due to half the damage that was dealt to the opponent that they defeated. Kinda makes sense that there would be a physical version. And honestly, it's fair to say Soul is the perfect counterpart to Life Taker. And yes, I kind of know that Luna is the counterpart to Soul. But when it comes down to it, Soul is kind of a counterpart to Life Taker in the long run due to the similarities of their effects. As when when a unit procs Soul, they have the ability to gain back health of using after defeating an opponent. They have ability to gain back health based on half of the damage they dealt to the opponent and that they just battled against and or defeated. And it really does say a lot, since more often than not, whenever I've played through Awakening or Fates, it's always the hero class that tends to get this effect. And more often than not, I've had a fair share of using it courtesy of the likes of Inigo or Severa or Charlotte or even Arthur. And yes, I've made Charlotte a hero since I believe it kind of fits her. Plus, if you can believe it, she shows less skin as a hero. That being said, that would also mean I make Arthur a berserker, but we'll get to that soon enough. And yeah, I wouldn't think you would think that wouldn't have put it as high as it did. Yeah. Fire Emblem Engage changed that by introducing it as the signature or skill of the Successor class. The signature promoted class of the Prince and Heir of Brodia, Diamant. And honestly, I believe this skill fits him to a T. Granted, honestly, every time I play through Fire Emblem Engage, it's always he's either between Diamant or his brother Alchrist, who gets Luna. But more often than not, Diamant proves to be a solid juggernaut due to this skill. Also, he's basically a hero in everything but name. Which really does say a lot considering Gold Mary exists. So, yeah. Who'da thunk? Alright, before we move on to the number 1 entry, we have some honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1, we have the Great Shield. And honestly, like I said, it's basically FE4 Pavis with another coat of paint. in a different coat of paint. I mean, it's a solid skill and a perfect usage whenever you make Amelia a perfect arguing point for making Amelia a knight and then making her a general. But even with that, it's a solid skill no matter what. Especially since you're able to have your opponents no-sell any attacks done to your unit by the opponent. That being said, it's kind of annoying when enemy generals have this skill. So, yeah. Honorable mention number 2 is Pass. And honestly, it allows you to basically move through spaces occupied by opponents, basically allowing you to slip past enemies and basically attack further out enemies, or enemies further down the line, or basically sneak attack any opponent that you pass by, which kind of works. However, I haven't had that chance to utilize it all that much. So yeah. Honorable mention number 3 is Gale Force. And honestly, this is one of the most broken skills in Awakening, to the point that it's become a sort of coveted skill for any second generation unit. However, more often than not, I haven't given a lot of units the Gale Force skill. And if I've had a unit that uses a Gale Force skill, being the Dark Flyer, it's mostly gonna be Cordelia. And even so, that rarely produces a unit with the... Excuse me. That rarely produces a unit with the Gale Force skill. That being said, honestly, I really do enjoy it, since when you end up making your move and either battle and defeating an opponent, you get the choice to make another move. So you can basically defeat 2 opponents in one turn. That's pretty cool. And the 4th honorable mention is Replicate. Basically, you have the chance to create a clone of yourself to basically serve as either a decoy or a partner for the unit that created them. Which really says a lot, considering how it's locked to the Mechanist class. The only reason is that it's stuck on the honorable mentions is because the units that have access to the Mechanist either have a class that they prefer to be in, case in point, the ninja trio of Kaze, Saizo, and Kagero, and Midori, or Yukimura, who sucks. Yeah, I said it. Yukimura sucks. Just sucks. Right. Finally, at number 1, we have Ether. Yeah. So you would have thought Soul would have been the number 1 entry? Yeah. I mean, Soul is basically solid, but it's only a taste of what Ether can do. And keep in mind, Awakening, while it was my third Fire Emblem game I played, and the first game I owned, period, like I owned physically, it was my first encounter of Ether. And oh boy, is this skill amazing. As basically, it's just a fusion of Soul and Luna. And even with that, it's completely awesome. Especially with how, with the animation that ensues when this skill is procced. And not only he does the unit that procs it get back health to equal to half the damage that they dealt to the opponent, but they're able to bypass enemy defenses. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And naturally, kind of makes sense that Chrom and Lucina would be the ones to activate it. But it's not the first time I was introduced to it, as the first time I was introduced to Ether was in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And granted, I was back in high school when Brawl was announced. Like, I was 16 and in the 10th grade. That's how long it was. Yeesh. 19 years ago. I am old. But even with that, I remember during the lead-up cycle to the release of Brawl, I remember everything that happened with the announcement involving different characters. From the announcement of Meta Knight, who became absolutely broken in the game, to the excitement of both Snake and Sonic being revealed in Brawl, with Snake opening the floodgates for characters from other M-rated games ending up in the Smash franchise. So basically, if it wasn't for Snake, we wouldn't have Bayonetta or Joker playable in Smash. And Sonic, basically because it was just two of the biggest gaming heavyweights facing off against each other for the first time before they extended an olive branch to each other and competed against each other in the Olympic Games that next year. But honestly, one of the most surprising ones is Ike. And while I learned that he was from Fire Emblem, I didn't realize he was exactly from the Teleus duology. Or in fact, I didn't know about the Teleus duology at that point. But the one thing I know about it was when we were introduced to, was basically due to the final Smash. Great Ether. And basically, growing up in high school, me and some of my friends had a joke with Ike and Great Ether, as basically we used to call it, whenever he used Great Ether, it was always either cheese pizza or plain pizza. So whenever I hear Great Ether, I hear either cheese pizza or plain pizza. Fast forward to when I first played through Path of Radiance, and I was able to experience Ether for the first time in all its glory. And I was floored when I saw it. And that was one of the best things I've ever seen. And even with that, it's gotten even better since then. Not only in that, like in the final cutscene of Radiant Dawn, where thanks to where with Micaiah's help, Ike is basically able to use Ether to completely wreck Ashura and save all of Teleus. To Fire Emblem, and then there's Fire Emblem Engage, where Great Ether basically becomes Ike's Engage attack. And yeah, it's basically just, either way, it's gotten further no matter what. And honestly, it's definitely thanks to Ike and everything that he's done for Ether that Ether has made it to the #1 spot and become the #1 spot at the #1 entry and my #1 favorite skill. Really says a lot. That being said, those are my top 10 favorite skills in Fire Emblem. I'm the Autistic Scyther. Like, comment, and subscribe. And that being said, it has been a year since I started my YouTube journey. And thus far, I have 48 subscribers. And honestly, I appreciate all of you, and I thank all of you for supporting I appreciate your support, and I thank all of you for your support from the bottom of my heart. That being said, I hope to get at least 100 subscribers by the end of this year. And honestly, I would deeply appreciate all of your support to help me get there. We can all do it. Additionally, I set up a Patreon account. I set up a Patreon account basically to help me make my channel the best it can be. Just improving it and adding different things that I want to make a reality for my channel that I haven't made a reality as of yet, like live streams, let's plays, all sorts of things. But I need your support. Granted, either through one of the paid subscription tiers or the free subscription tier. It doesn't matter. All I know is that I greatly appreciate any help and support that you can give me. From moral support, no matter what. And honestly, I'll be here doing the best I can to entertain you and basically bring you these countdowns to the best of my ability. And speaking of which, tune in next week as we're taking a look at another console. And it's one of the most classic consoles of all time. The Nintendo 64. See you next time.